Thank you all very much for joining me tonight. Tonight we're going to talk about the scandal coming from the Cambridge Dictionary, and we're going to get into whether or not it's actually a problem because the actual definition might surprise you. I don't know if you guys have looked at this, but there is a lot of hay being made over the changing of the definition of woman in the Cambridge Dictionary. So I took the liberty of pulling up the actual definition, and we will talk about that today. And we will also talk about some good news as relates to whether trans surgeries are allowed to be prohibited by certain hospitals. Most of you guys know that I used to work, I don't know if most of you guys know, but I used to work at a Catholic hospital. Really enjoyed my time there. People were not religious, but they were very well-grounded. They were very properly oriented. They provided really good care for the patients, and I really had a good experience working there. What they found just today, a court ruled that Catholic hospitals cannot be compelled to perform gender change surgeries, which I view as a huge positive win because, speaking of positive, a right to have your gender surgically reaffirmed by a hospital of your choosing is in fact a positive right, which we do not have, which we'll get into a little bit this evening. It's a little bit of a complicated subject. I will give you my understanding of it, and then you guys can draw your own conclusions or disagree with me or whatever you like. So let's start by looking at this tweet from Sophie Corcoran. She goes, "Try and tell me they're not trying to erase women. Cambridge Dictionary have changed the definition of a woman. This cannot be accepted. We will not be erased. Woman equals adult human female, not someone who identifies as female." So that is a perfectly fair analysis given the definition that she's showing us here. This looks like what they've done here is change the definition so that it only includes trans people. As in, she was the first trans woman elected to national office. Mary is a woman who was assigned male at birth, which is very interesting that they're not actually giving examples of woman as the term woman without some kind of qualifier. A trans woman, a woman who was assigned male at birth. So I do have my issues with Cambridge Dictionary, but we're going to look at the actual definition because this isn't all of it. Someone asked too here in her comments, how do they describe man? They describe it the same way they describe woman. So let's look at the Cambridge definition. What's this? Interesting. So a woman is still an adult female human being, as it should be. That had better never change. She's a really nice woman. A woman and two men were arrested the day after the explosion. Woman got the vote in Britain in 1918. She is Ireland's first woman, equals female president. Okay. And then they offer this alternative definition, an adult who lives and identifies as female, even though they may have been said to have been a different sex at birth. So this is where I take issue with this, okay? So we're not saying you're a different sex at birth. We're not saying any of that nonsense. What is happening at birth is an observation of your biological sex, whether that is male or female, and that is determined by your chromosomes. This is not something that's truly negotiable. I also found it interesting that they are not capitalizing this first name, proper noun. Fascinating. So they're just, at this point, I just think they're trying to be edgy. I feel like they're just trying to get an edge on somebody and like put their name back in the news. All publicity is good publicity. But let's continue on. A wife or female sexual partner and women in general. So it's not about trans women. See, this is the qualifier. Oh, I didn't mean to click that. I don't really care about reading that. First, trans woman. I don't think that qualifier can be removed if you expect clarity in language. A woman who is assigned female at birth is a similar qualifier. So I think the comment about how they define men is similarly questionable. So let's look at this one. Look at this, an adult male human being, young, tall man, men are women, men and women, men are women. The man in the green jacket, for a very long time, only men could join the armed forces. Steve can solve anything, the man's genius. And here we have an adult who lives and identifies as male, though they may have been said to have been a different sex at birth. So even though they are technically giving the proper definition of man and woman, what they're doing with the second definition is a very subtle shifting of language that is really frustrating to see And most people, I don't think, notice it unless they're really looking for it. I think that one of the things that the left has figured out is that language has a certain kind of power to it. Words actually affect how we see the rest of the world. And this is something that wellness experts, people who encourage meditation and mindfulness experts will tell you to do, is reshape the way you talk about the world so that you have a better experience in it. And this is a very real, very reasonable understanding of how words affect human beings. This is something that Jordan Peterson mentions. He talks about how logos in the beginning was the word and the word was God. Very interesting idea right out of the Bible. And I don't think that most people take that into account when they consider the power of words. Right-wingers, for example, will say, it's just a word. It's not that big a deal. It doesn't matter if you change a word. The definition actually remains the same. And it is technically true that lies exist because words can 100% contradict reality. But the insidious thing about changing language like this is in law. When you look at how law is applied, you have to understand that by changing the definition of woman, you are changing how these people are treated under the law. And I have a serious issue with that. I wanted to mention something that came up. I'm actually going to pull this up. Let me move me back to my normal screen so I can find this. But there was a tweet about somebody talking about some new legislation that passed in Scotland. And I think that it is fascinating to me that women are voting for this, because what is happening through this legislation is that women are being excluded. They are being thrown entirely out of the picture. And it's very interesting to me to watch happen and to watch compassionate women vote in favor of this. So let's look at this. And I commented, women voted this into being. I'd say repeal the 19th, but it is too late. This will come here. Women will be the victims, and that includes me, even though I fought against this literally my whole life. And they're referring to the SNP, which is the Scottish National Party, I believe. And there's a majority of voters in the SNP. The people who put this in place are majority women, literally 52%. And this is the same for Democrats in the United States. So let's look at this. Your SNP government lied to you. They said a GRC was simply an admin issue to make the lives of those who pretend to be the opposite sex easier. Ooh, spicy language. They've just argued and won a court ruling that a GRC changes a person's legal sex for every scenario. Don't worry, we'll figure out what a GRC is in just a minute. So they're changing the law. That means every boy, man, girl, and woman over 16 can change their birth certificate to a different sex, whether they have gender dysphoria or not. I think that might be gender request change or something. And they removed the ability for you, me, and everyone else to differentiate between women and men who pretend to be women. You can no longer receive same-sex intimate medical examinations. You can no longer recover in a hospital in a same-sex ward. Your aging mother can no longer receive same-sex intimate care in her nursing home. Rape survivors can no longer request same-sex counseling services or examination. Violent male rapists cannot be stopped from being jailed in women's prisons. Women cannot ever again organize women-only events. Your government have redefined woman as a mixed-sex category, and there's nothing you can do about it because you can't object. If you do, you're guilty of a hate crime. Now do you see it? That is a very interesting analysis. So we're going to look up what a GRC is, just because I'm not familiar with that term. GRC, Scottish National Party. Let's see what we find. Court of Session. Yeah, gender recognition ruling could impact new law. Okay, whatever. Cookies. Give me more cookies. Court of Session gender recognition ruling could impact new law. So let's read about this a little bit. A trans woman with a gender recognition certificate is a woman as far as the law is concerned, the Court of Session has ruled. That's exactly what I'm talking about. Exactly. And this is what is happening in Scotland, and you mark my words, it will come here. I do not believe for a second that women who vote in the US are willing to forego this flagrant virtue signaling, because they don't care about women who are in jail. They don't care about the fact that a man would be able to examine them and would take care of their aging mother. This doesn't strike them as an issue. This to me just smacks of narcissism, the fact that women will vote for this. It's not just narcissism, it's solipsism. Nothing else exists except them right now. Because I bet you a nickel that a woman who votes in favor of this is going to be more than a little bit upset, likely, when they go to see the doctor, and it doesn't matter to them what gender doctor the woman chooses. For example, I would never take my car to a mechanic who does not also own a car. And for that reason, I typically choose a female OBGYN. I see no issue with this. It makes perfect sense to me. And I think that and I know that women aren't necessarily as good of doctors as men are. I thank affirmative action for that, to be sure. But I think that it makes sense to me to have someone who has the same genitalia as you examine you. That just makes perfect sense. And I think that once you remove the option to do that, people are going to become increasingly more frustrated. But by then, it will be too late. And this is really what it looks like is going to happen in Scotland for sure, and definitely in the US too. For sure, I think it's coming here. Somebody in the chat says male OBGYNs are sus, in my opinion. 100%. I don't entirely know why a male would choose to be an OBGYN. I'm sure they have disparate motivations, obviously, but you're never going to see anything good if you're an OB. One of the things doctors often talk about is the fact that they study the human body and it's amazing and interesting and it does miraculous things. But then when you go out and you start practicing, all you see are the worst examples of how it can break down, and it's terrifying. And I think that that's something that... that's something that would factor into whether someone wants to become an OBGYN. With a female OB, the understanding is that, oh, you care about other women and you want to help them and you recognize what it's like to have your own cervical pain or whatever weird random thing. Cervical is related to the neck, not the cervix, just for the record. But I digress. But anyway, yeah, I think that this person's thread is fully accurate. Unfortunately, because I was hoping they were doing a little bit of fear mongering here, but that's exactly what this looks like. And it deeply troubles me because as we see with them attempting to change a definition in our own dictionaries here, I see the same effect working its way into the law in the US. And I have a serious issue with that. I don't know what can be done to stop it right offhand by the ordinary person. I would like to just halt it in its tracks, but I am concerned that with such a left-wing administration, I don't think there's any way to stop this now. And I don't trust Republicans to make the necessary positive changes. The only thing we can do, and I'm going to keep harping this until I'm dead, most likely, is work at the local level and make sure that the right people get elected to the school board, to city council, to the mayor's office, to the district attorney, to local judges. These are the things that we can focus on, and these things will affect how these things pass. And then when the time comes to vote for a president, one of the things that I was thinking of just earlier today, because this case is coming up, I think it's this case coming up that I'm going to talk about, but I was talking in reference to a specific case that I suspect will go to the Supreme Court. Yeah, it is this case. What we're going to see at the Supreme Court is because of President Trump. And for that, I strongly credit him for everything he was able to do. He was able to put a bunch of judges in office that are now going to carry on his legacy through time in ways that probably no one had thought about before. And this is one of the key assets of having a conservative-ish president. We take what we can get. You just elect the man and you hope he does some good things in the meantime. But I'm going to read you this article about these Catholic hospitals because this actually is really good news. And I wanted to leave on a slightly happier note than I started. Today's going to be relatively short, just for the record. This is from MRC TV, the Media Research Center. The court ruled Catholics cannot be forced to do gender surgeries. That devout Joe Biden really has a funny way of showing his devotion to the Catholic Church. Back when he was vice president, his boss decreed that elderly nuns had to pay for other people's birth control. Joe didn't say a word. Then when he became president in his own right, little Joey the altar boy from Scranton, altar spelled wrong, shame on you MRC, decided to force Catholic doctors and nurses to mutilate the genitals of deeply confused individuals. That's all besides his barbaric pro-abortion stance. Finally, though, Joe is going to have to do some penance. In a win for religious freedom, a U.S. court ruled December 9th that the Biden administration cannot force a group of Catholic healthcare providers to perform gender transformation surgeries on transgender people due to their deeply held religious beliefs. Judges unanimously ruled that it would be an infringement on the religious freedoms of the plaintiffs. In a nation in the throes of transgender craze that prioritizes the woke agenda over any religious freedoms, this is a shocking, rare, and exciting win. The 3-judge panel of the 8th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals agreed with the North Dakota federal judge who first heard the case back in 2021. As Reuters put it, the U.S. Health and Human Services rule infringes on the religious freedom of the plaintiffs, including a group of nuns who run health clinics for the poor and an association of Catholic healthcare professionals. The Becket Fund for Religious Liberty and the North Dakota AG's office represented the religious groups that sued against the Biden administration. Luke Goodrich of the Becket Fund for Religious Liberty told MRC-TV in an email, "The federal government has no business forcing doctors to violate their conscience or to perform controversial procedures that could permanently harm their patients. This is a common sense ruling that protects patients, aligns with best medical practice, and ensures doctors can follow their Hippocratic oath to do no harm. Common sense ruling indeed. There should never be or have been question for the need for this case to even enter into a court. As citizens of the United States, the land of the free, we have an undeniable right to our freedom of religion, and that includes religious conscience." Goodrich told the Washington Examiner that the plaintiffs had no problem treating transgender people for anything from the common cold to cancer, but if they wanted gender transformative surgery, that they should seek care elsewhere. "I don't think that's too much to ask. Nobody should have to do something that directly contradicts deeply held religious convictions." The judge in this case, Peter Welty of Fargo, North Dakota, indicated that applying the rule to providers with religious objections to performing gender transition surgeries would violate the Federal Religious Freedom Restoration Act. That law prohibits the government from burdening an individual's exercise of religion, as Reuters summarized. "This is a win for freedom of religion for now. Hopefully wins like this keep happening and cases stop having to be had that question groups and individuals' rights to practice and honor their religion." Of course it won't end here. This is going to continue at least for a little while longer. Unfortunately, I was thinking earlier today, like, when do the good times come? These just seem kind of like hard times rolling on and on. And I'm sure that they're coming. I know that they are. I know that with the help of good people like you guys, I think that we're going to crest the hill and it's going to get a whole lot brighter. At least I hope so, because this is all rather disheartening. But I don't think that we should hope for times to be better and easier. I think that we should celebrate the fact that we are where we are, even though it's hard, and we should recognize that this is going to make us stronger and better and result in a better future for everyone. It's just a cycle of cultures. It's good times. Oh, what's the old saying? Hard times create strong men create good times create weak men create hard times. So honestly, we are heading into hard times created by weak men, and I am not convinced that we will be out of it for a while. In fact, one of the things I've been thinking about lately is how much time we're going to have to give everything, like to the point that I'm not convinced we're going to see these changes that I hope that we could see in the world. We can dream, but I don't believe that we are going to be able to get there just now. We just need to be tireless and work hard for our children to have good times in the future. And then we need to stop and ask, do we want our children to have good times? Do we want our children to be good men? No, absolutely not. Weak men. What we need is the proper amount of tension between what we can achieve, what we have achieved, and what we want to achieve. So there absolutely always needs to be a challenge before us, responsibility that we're carrying. And people tend to think, part of the reason I think the world is in such terrible shape is because people tend to think that these things are negative. They view hard times as something that they need to escape. They view responsibility as something that they need to be able to find a way to shirk. And I don't think that's a proper way of looking at life. I think that's why we have such narcissism and solipsism and such a focus on ourselves and a rejection of any kind of future, any kind of positive move in the future. But I digress. Let me see what you guys are thinking. Oh, Liz got to keep her sign. I did. I stole it from the studio. I can't imagine who else would have used it, honestly. Let's see here. Hello, very positive. Hello, hello. Hi, Lids. How can the government force anyone to perform any procedure? They really can't. And that's exactly what this case was kind of establishing, which I think is great. Yeah, okay, so what is female? That's actually something that I wanted to look up. Let's see what the Cambridge Dictionary says about the definition of female. I almost just dumped my drink all over my laptop. Andy is cringing in the other room. Please don't kill me, dear. Cambridge Dictionary, female. Yeah, okay, let's see here. So we have female. Belonging or relating to women. This is exactly the issue that Ben Shapiro was pointing out. He's like, this gets incredibly circular incredibly quickly because the definition of woman is an adult human female, and the definition of female is belonging or relating to women. So you actually need to give some substantive difference in kind between your definition of female and your definition of women. They shouldn't be overlapping. I believe this is very repetitive. I would say it's very circular. Okay, so here's a better definition. Belonging or relating to the sex that can give birth to young or produce eggs. Belonging or relating to a plant or part of a plant that produces flowers that will later develop into fruit. Used to refer to a piece of equipment that has a hole or space into which another part can be fitted. Yep, this is all fair. Related word, femaleness. Interesting. The fact or quality of being female. And this is the only definition they have in there. Interesting. Huh. Fascinating. Anyway, okay, cool. Yeah, now we have our definition of female, and I think that's a relatively fair definition. Honestly, at the end of the day, my conclusion is kind of just that I would never use the Cambridge Dictionary for any kind of, definitions that I really need to see. When I was in speech and debate, we would define everything before we started. So we'd go through and we'd be like, okay, we're going to talk about border security. So we're going to define the border. We're going to define security. We're going to define the terms of what we're proposing and all this good stuff. And somebody says science denier. Plex Wayman. I wonder if they asked Matt Walsh's opinion on what is a woman. LOL. Good idea. Actual science equals chromosomes XX and XY. The rest is postmodernism 100%. And this is what I'm talking about when I say that they're not assigning you a gender at birth. They're not assigning you a biological sex. All they're doing is observing. I genuinely don't believe that a doctor who's delivering a baby has a vested interest in whether it's a boy or a girl. Honestly, who cares as long as it's healthy? I don't think that they really have any bias one way or the other, and nor should they. Let's see here. This is how a dictionary jumps a shark. Thanks, Andy. Correct. Yes. Identify as Joe Biden. Give me the launch code so I can end this malarkey, Jack. Fair. Words are not words until their meanings are defined and accepted. Well, words are going to remain words even if no one accepts them. But the fact that someone is trying to change the definition should really be a sign that something deeper is going on. It's not just about words. It's about our understanding of what they're trying to define. X's and Y's are just a DNA concept. Yes, correct. Well, not to be that guy, but genetics is a bit more complicated than XX and XY, though anything besides the two is classified as a genetic disorder for a reason. That's correct. And I feel bad for people who actually are intersex and who actually have this issue with their genes because they're being used as pawned by this overarching political movement to try to get trans ideology accepted into the mainstream. Let's see here. Andy chatting in the chat. They don't use words to communicate, but rather to manipulate. Yeah, I think that's an entirely correct analysis, and I would 100% credit Michael Malice for that. The income tax in World War I was all men, though I'm not sure. Are men responsible for the income tax? Because if they are, I am upset. Definition of the word dictionary needs to be changed. An arbitrary stance upon the social agenda responsible for the production of said dictionary. Yeah, it quickly becomes circular if you're not careful. Just trying to explain all this to my friend earlier, but we couldn't figure out what was actually going on. LOL. Yeah, so if you actually go to the dictionary, you can see the full definitions, and then you need to understand that by changing the word woman in the dictionary, you're also changing it in the law, which is going to affect how it is applied to people and likely will not be equal or even. They're talking about Mac in the chat, which is making me hungry. I'm going to go get dinner here in a minute. He's also a lot older than her. It's kind of sketchy. Wait, what's going on? Some male OBGYNs have uteruses, Lydia. Okay, that's fair. When you put on your full armor of God, you take out the word of God, and the word is a sword. Yeah, that's a great observation. This is exactly why I think that they talk about being armed and prepared for battle in Psalms, and why, like Jordan Peterson talks about, why Jesus is considered the actual truth, the logos, and something that actually makes a perceivable difference in the world. If the hetero population is 90% of the population, then an easy majority rule should fix it. Yeah, that's fair analysis. We do live in a democracy, right? Imagine if we had Hillary SCOTUS right now instead of Trump's. Yes, exactly. That's what I'm getting at. We should be grateful. Whatever you think of Trump, we should be incredibly grateful that he put good judges in place. Forget OBGYN, says Quantum of Strange Quark. Why would anyone want to be a proctologist? See, so many questions I don't understand. But it does kind of raise a question, why would you want to be like an oncologist? All you're going to see is terrible things. At least with a cardiologist, you can see like really interesting chambers of the heart and all that good stuff. Let's see here. Yep, fair analysis. That's my new verbal tick. I got to work on that. All right, rock on, Andy Lids. Thank you, Quantum Strange Quark. We really appreciate that. Thank you for the super chat. Seems like a long run. It's giving more alcohol to someone with a drinking problem. I'm not sure what that's in reference to. Misread your chat. I'm sure the alcoholic would feel loved that you got them drunk. Yeah, absolutely not. Absolutely not. Right, there's a lot of psychological problems with this surgery. Yeah, I think the Media Research Center is super biased, but at the end of the day, that's okay. That's just the article I picked. Hello, Andy. How's it going? Andy's joined me off screen.
Print out that super chat.
Are we?
Yeah.
Awesome. Let's do it. I think that's awesome. We appreciate all you guys' super chats. I really appreciate that you guys join me each evening.
$20 more and you get printed out.
That's right. If you send us a $20 super chat, we'll print it out. We'll try to put it behind us, at least for a little while, because I feel like we're going to run out of room if a bunch of people send us those things. But I'm not too worried about that. Buy old dictionaries at used bookstores for real. This is great advice. So anytime I go to Goodwill, I'm always looking at the book section, and I'm always looking at, like, seriously, I know you guys are familiar with the kerfuffle over American Girl publications because they published this new book that said that you can just pause your puberty. We know this is not true. But the way American Girl used to be, very wholesome, very encouraging of femininity, very interesting historical stories that I did enjoy. I always really wanted an American Girl doll. They were too expensive for me because I had so many siblings. But at the same time, it's like everything has changed. Absolutely everything. Like Jack Posobiec talks about this frequently. He's like, the world that you grew up in no longer exists. And we know this is true. We cannot waste time being nostalgic. One of the things that millennials tend to run into is that they wish to remain a child forever because they seem to mistake the feeling of being a child with like some kind of happiness that they no longer have. And I think that's fair. But at the same time, there is a Bible verse about growing up and letting go of the things that are childlike and embracing the things that are adult. Because, and the Desiderata talks about this as well. They're like, you need to age with grace. That is 100% in your best interest. Is going to make you a more balanced, well-balanced, and a happier person. But I am going to digress one last time. Thank you all very much for joining me. Thank you, Quantum Strange Quark, for sponsoring me this evening. I appreciate that. You guys should check out Making the Argument with Nick Freitas over at their channel, Nick J. Freitas on YouTube. We have another episode coming out tonight about Christmas shopping with a purpose, talking about how you can use some of these super cool new tools to make sure that you're not giving money to people who hate you, which I view as a very positive thing. All right. Anything I'm trying to remember what I was not supposed to forget. I think I've remembered everything. Good for me. I'm very proud of myself. All right, you guys, I will see you all tomorrow. Thank you all so much for tuning in. And until next time, bye guys.